call the meeting of March the 12th to order, please. Roll call.
Baker,
Here.
Carlson,
Here.
Russo,
Here.
Swigert,
Here.
Tallman.
Here.
Okay, before the meeting starts, I have a statement to read before every meeting. Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body created by the City of Iowa City according to state statutes. Board's purpose is to decide on applications for variances from the zoning ordinance, appeals of decisions of city officials, and applications for special exceptions requested under the zoning ordinance. Board of Adjustment is an independent volunteer board made up of Iowa City residents and is not part of the city administration. We're assisted in our work by the city attorney's office and by planning staff. Prior to this meeting, board members received the materials submitted by the applicants, the staff reports reviewing the application, and any correspondence submitted by members of the public. Board members have not discussed the application or its merits with each other, staff, the applicant, or any other member of the public in advance of this meeting. All consideration and discussion by the board takes place in open meeting here tonight, where we also have an opportunity to hear from the public. Board bases its decisions on facts and evidence allowed by city code presented in open meeting. Concise and truthful testimony helps us a great deal in our decision-making. We ask that if you wish to speak, that you come to the podium, print your name and address on the sign-in sheet, and speak clearly into the microphone so your testimony can be heard by all present and by our minute taker as all testimony becomes part of the public record. We ask that the proceedings be orderly and that when you are testifying, you address your remarks to the board. And if this hearing becomes lengthy, we may ask that testimony be focused on new facts or on information not already presented. The order of proceedings for each application will be an oral report by staff summarizing the issues of the case and staff's recommendations, an opportunity for the applicant to speak, an opportunity for any other interested parties to speak for or against the application, an opportunity for final statements and arguments by the staff and applicant, and the board will then discuss the issues and evidence, state its findings, and vote on a motion. Motions are always made in the affirmative. First order of business is special exception item EXC 25-0002. Application submitted by Stacy Humiston of Reach for Your Potential requesting a special exception to allow the expansion of a daycare use in a low-density, single-family residential RS5 zone for the property located at 1839 and 1849 B Street. First up will be a staff report.
Good evening, Parker Walsh, Associate Planner. And as the chair mentioned, tonight we'll be going over an application submitted by Stacy Humiston of Reach for Your Potential. This is requesting a special exception to increase the size of a daycare use previously approved in a low-density single-family residential zone. Shown here is an aerial of the property. This building on the left is 1839 B Street, and it's the application that was previously approved to become a daycare use. And here on the right is 1849 B Street. This is an existing single-family use that was constructed in 1928 and has been purchased and is now owned by Reach for Your Potential. This is the zoning map. Both of these properties are zoned RS5, as is the surrounding neighborhood. Reach for Your Potential requested a special exception approval for the daycare use first in November 2024 and was approved with the following conditions. Prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, improvement of the alley from the western property line to Fifth Avenue, development of a pedestrian path with a demarcated crossing over the alley from the building to the play area. Any new pedestrian routes through the site that directly abut the area shall be separated by a raised curb or barrier with a minimum of 5 inches. Provide screening to the S2 standard between parking areas and adjacent properties along the east and west property lines. And outdoor lights must be brought into compliance with the current outdoor lighting standards. Reach for Your Potential purchased 1849 B Street in February of this year with the intent of expanding daycare operations and taking on children and staff from a nearby closing daycare. The daycare intends to accommodate up to 140 children. And the reason for the addition is because the zoning code does not consider existing building constraints or necessary usable space needed to efficiently accommodate children and staff. So by taking on more children, they need some additional area to accommodate them. The building addition would provide more space and an interior redesign, which allows age groups to be spaced out appropriately and receive the necessary staffing. The maximum amount of children allowed will be limited by the parking constraints, and the applicant did hold a good neighbor meeting in March. Shown here is a photo of the two properties. Here on the right, we have the existing 1839, which has been approved as of November for daycare use, and 1849, which is the existing single-family residential use, which has been purchased by Reach for Your Potential. Next, we have the site plan. The traffic flow is intended to come off of B Street and flow in towards the south and then down and out the alley. To accommodate this additional children and staff, they have proposed to expand the parking area, which will be located south of the alley, and they do include an S5 fence, which is a 6-foot opaque fence, as well as shrubs along the perimeter of the fence to further buffer from nearby uses. The outdoor play area has been moved north of the alley, located just behind the new addition here, and would be approximately 4,100 square feet. And just so you can get a better view of the addition is this portion located here. Next, I'll go into the specific and general approval criteria. As a reminder, the Board of Adjustment is charged with approving with conditions, or denying the application based on the facts presented. Starting first with the daycare use standards. Required interior activity areas. Child daycare centers must contain at least 35 square feet of usable interior floor space per child. There are some areas of the building which are excluded, such as reception areas, kitchens, and storages. If the cafeteria doubles as an activity space, the zoning code will count that space as well. The subject property is about 6,800 square feet of interior floor space used for daycare purposes, which could accommodate up to 196 children. The applicant proposes the subject property for a daycare use of 140 children, and the applicant has agreed to take on the children and staff from a closing daycare. About 3,600 square foot is the addition, which is intended to provide more space for the children and staff coming in, but is not significantly increasing the maximum daycare occupancy that's allowed. The parking requirements will limit the daycare to 140 children, and this is due to requiring stacking spaces. The site is constrained, and there only 7 stacking spaces can fit on site. Child daycare uses must provide a fenced outdoor play area of not less than 100 square feet. This property is zoned residential, and all playground equipment will be located outside of the front and side setbacks. The site plan includes an outdoor play area of about 4,100 square feet, which means they could accommodate up to 41 children at any one time. If there's overflow in this location, they are within walking distance to a nearby park as well. Staff recommends the condition that outdoor play area be enclosed by a 4-foot opaque fence, and that it be screened to the S2 standard along the east property line to provide additional screening and buffering from residential uses. The use must provide a drop-off and pickup area in a location that is convenient to or has good pedestrian access. As mentioned, most of this traffic is intended to flow in one direction. That's coming in off of B Street, continuing through the property south, and then exiting through the alley. This alley is currently unimproved, and the proposed use is for a daycare accommodating up to 140 children, which will significantly increase the daily traffic within the alley. Due to the anticipated increase in daily traffic beyond what is typically experienced in an alley, staff recommends a condition that Reach for Your Potential improve the alley to city standards from the western property line to 5th Avenue, the shortest possible improvement route to a street prior to occupancy to ensure safe and efficient travel through the site. Adjacent property owners will be responsible for snow clearance, and the city would maintain the paved alleyway surface. The subject property proposes 34 parking spaces, 20 of these which will be located south of the alley, and 14 are existing non-conforming spaces located along the building. The site has 7 stacking spaces west of the building on a 9-foot wide directional drive. And stacking spaces are adequate stacking and parking spaces are adequate to accommodate the 140 children and 14 staff members proposed. The site plan does also show the 4 parking spaces for bikes that it will be required, and parking and stacking spaces are connected to the building through pedestrian routes. Shown here is pictures of the existing surface. This is looking east from the property, and this is looking from 5th Avenue west down the alley. A sidewalk must be constructed connecting the main entrance of the center to the adjacent public right-of-way. The subject property has a sidewalk from the main entrance to the public right-of-way. However, there is no existing sidewalk along B Street, nor is there plans for one to be installed. The site plan proposes new pedestrian paths with raised curbs through the property along the west and south sides of the building that help minimize the extent to which users must walk across drives or aisles. Staff does recommend a condition that any new pedestrian routes through the site have a raised curb to help ensure pedestrian safety. Staff also recommends the condition that a pedestrian path with a demarcated crossing be constructed over the alley. If the proposed use is located in a residential or central planning district, it must comply with the multifamily site development standards. This proposed use, both of them actually 1839 and 1849, are in a residential zone and in the central planning district. So the current development and future must comply with the multifamily standards. The building and site meet some of the multifamily development standards, but don't comply with all of them, and that's standards related to parking locations, existing parking locations, screening, the design of the surface parking, mechanical equipment locations, and some of the additional central planning district standards. All existing non-compliant features are either considered elements of non-conforming structure or development, which does allow this change of use, and the new construction would be required to comply with all these zoning code requirements. Now moving on to the general standards. The specific proposed exception will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, general welfare. The existing building, proposed addition, and site characteristics are well suited for a daycare use. The proposed use will provide services that are beneficial to the neighborhood, and potential negative impacts due to increased traffic are mitigated as discussed below. The specific proposed exception will not be injurious to the use, enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity, and will not substantially diminish or impair property values in the neighborhood. The proposed daycare use will primarily be within the building, and there is that outdoor play area that limits to no more than 41 children at one time. This outdoor play area will also be screened from nearby areas to help mitigate these impacts. Additional traffic is likely to be generated by the proposed use during business hours, and the proposed traffic flow, site layout, and recommended conditions will help to mitigate potential negative impacts. New parking areas south of the alley are set back and screened from the abutting uses, and staff does recommend a condition that the parking area be screened by an S5 fence within a minimum height of 6 feet, and that the fence perimeter be included or be surrounded by additional S2 screening. So an S5 fence would be a solid privacy fence. That's what we're thinking here, and it's a 6-foot height. Staff also recommends S2 screening between existing parking areas and the outdoor play area from adjacent properties along the east and west property lines. Establishment of the specific proposed exception will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. The surrounding neighborhood is already fully developed, and the proposed building addition will increase the size of the previously approved daycare facility, and the intent is to provide beneficial services that will not substantially impact the development or improvement of surrounding property. And then the conditions staff has proposed are intended to help mitigate any potential negative effects. Adequate utilities, access roads, and drainage has been or will be provided. This is a built-out area, so all utilities, access roads, and facilities are already established, and it is anticipated that the alley will see a significant increase in vehicle use. This increased traffic through the site is expected to accelerate the alleyway deterioration without improvements. Improving the alley to city standards would provide a paved surface maintained by the city for the life of the pavement that is capable of accommodating the additional traffic volume. If it's left unimproved, the alley would likely require significant ongoing maintenance from the adjacent property owners. And some of this maintenance for the surface could include potholes or other unmaintained areas that could cause vehicle damage. And the conditions staff are proposing are intended to mitigate this effect. Adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress or egress. As mentioned, the front is access from B Street, and the rear is access from the alley that enters and exits onto Garden and Fifth Avenue. And most of the traffic is expected to flow in one direction into the site from B Street and out towards the alley. Some staff and drop-off traffic will utilize the alley to access additional parking spaces in the rear of the building, but staff recommends a condition of approval: do not enter signage and one-way pavement markings located on the property to direct traffic through the site and prevent any reverse traffic flow. Conditions will ensure the alley is improved to accommodate the increased traffic and can anticipate the future traffic volumes prior to occupancy of the site. No changes are proposed to the existing street access or drive. Any new parking areas on the portion of the property south of the alley will comply with all current standards. Except for the specific regulations and standards applicable to the exception being considered, the specific proposed exception in all other respects conforms to the code. The subject property meets most of the standards in the single-family RS5 zone and multifamily site development standards, and the building addition and only site development standards will comply with the standards. Some elements of the site that are non-conforming will be brought into compliance with the current standards, and that's things like landscape buffers that the existing parking doesn't currently have, and lighting. Staff recommends a condition that all outdoor lighting, new or existing, be compliant with the standards for single-family and two-family uses. Staff also recommends all outdoor lighting be turned off by 1 hour after business closes to limit the impacts of lighting on neighboring properties. The proposed exception will be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The future land use map of the comprehensive plan designates both these properties as residential, and the central planning district designates this area as private, institutional, and single-family and duplex. The comprehensive plan does support goods and services within convenient walking distance for residents, and the proposed exception would expand an existing daycare use, which is classified as private institutional and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends approval of application EXC 25-0002 with an expiration timeline of 12 months to allow time to receive approval of the site plan, alley improvements, and secure building permit to allow the expansion of a daycare use in a low-density single-family residential zone for property located at 1839 and 1849 B Street, subject to the following conditions. Prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, improvement of the alley to city standards from the western property line to Fifth Avenue, development of a pedestrian path with a demarcated crossing over the alley from the building and play area to the parking area, the outdoor play area being enclosed by a 4-foot tall opaque fence to provide extra screening from the nearby residential uses. Any new pedestrian routes through the site that directly abut parking areas shall be separated by a raised curb or a barrier that is a minimum of 5 inches in height. Provide screening to the S2 standard between existing parking areas and the outdoor area from the adjacent properties along the east and west property lines. Provide screening of the new parking area with a 6 to 8 foot fence that meets the S5 standard and includes additional S2 screening around the east, west, and south fence perimeter. Provide do not enter signage and one-way pavement markings to direct traffic through the site. Outdoor lighting, new and existing, be compliant with standards for single-family and two-family uses, and outdoor lighting must be turned off by 1 hour after business closes. That concludes the presentation, and I now turn it over to the board.
Questions for staff?
I have a question. On the site plan, it shows 9 parking spaces backing out into the improved alley. Is
Yep.
that allowed?
That is one of the non-conforming features. The code would say if the parking area has 8 or more spaces, you can't back into an alley. But since this is existing, it's allowed to legally continue.
All right, thank you very much. And on the west edge of those parking spaces, I don't see any kind of demarcation where the parking ends. Is there any concern about interference with the one-way drive that goes around the site and to the alley? If someone were to park west of that 9th space, it would kind of clog that up.
Yes, this is just a concept. Once we get to the official site plan application, we can work through that in more detail. But these spaces will be required to be fully striped.
I had another question about accessibility. The site plan calls out a lot of entrances with stoops. Can you identify the accessible entrances to the building?
Yeah, this southern location, or I guess it would be the eastern location, this is an ADA ramp that will allow you to access the building here. And this would be an accessible entryway. There's also an entryway here along the north side, and then this back side, which is, I believe, what you're referring to with the stoop. But the wheelchair ADA ramp was on this side of the building.
So where it says stoop, that's actually a ADA ramp, or?
Yes, this is a ADA ramp located here.
Right. What, I'm sorry, but you were talking about the south entrance, kind of the southwest entrance? That's a stoop, right?
Yes, this is stairways, I believe, entering the building, and I don't believe there's any modifications proposed to that entryway or any of the other existing
But there
entries.
are at least 2 accessible entrances to the building.
Yes, and I do know that they will be constructing an elevator, so if you can come in on the ground floor, you can still get up to the second floor.
Thank you, Parker.
Any other questions for the staff? Parker, I just have one quick question. This property, daycare use at this property has been approved in the past, right?
Correct.
What was the previously approved capacity?
We didn't set a limit. The existing building area could accommodate up to 158 children. That's what the zoning code would say. But there are some interior building constraints that would limit the owner from actually reaching that maximum occupancy.
But we've set a limit of 140 on this one.
We're not specifically asking for a limit of 140. The applicant is saying that they intend to have up to 140 children.
Okay, if they wanted to have more, what would have to change?
They would have to be able to accommodate all the parking requirements, and then, as noted, they're really limited by the amount of stacking spaces they can have on site. That requires every 20 children is 1 stacking space, which is why their limit is set to 140, because they can only fit 7 stacking and loading spaces on the property.
Okay, as far as you can tell, there's no other space for additional parking on the property?
No additional stacking or loading space. Those cannot extend into public rights of way, so they're kind of limited by what's here and shown on the site.
So the reasonable expectation is the 140 is a
Correct.
pretty firm
Yeah.
limit. Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions for the staff, I'd like to open up the public hearing and have the applicant speak, please.
Hello, good evening. My name is Stacy Humiston. I am the Executive Director at Reach for Your Potential. As you all are aware, we're needing to expand the current plan, or the previous plan, I should say, to meet the growing need for reliable, high-quality childcare in our community. This expansion is partly due to the closure of Loving Arms Early Learning Center, and they're located in the St. Mark's Church currently. They will be leaving that location this fall and will be closing at that point. They reached out to us after we received word that we were receiving a state grant. That was, it was funny enough, it was the week after our previous special exception was approved. It was the week after that this governor actually came out with the press release that it was there and available. We received notification in early January that we did receive this grant, which, you know, we were all very happy about. And a few days later, we received a voicemail or contact information from Loving Arms, one of their board members, and wanted to discuss, obviously, options that they could have for their children, their enrolled children, and their staff. So we were, with this grant, we were able to go ahead and, you know, discuss the ins and outs of possibly merging or buying or all of the above. And we came down to whoever of their enrolled children will be coming over to us, and they'll be transitioning, as well as all of their staff. And we have a couple people from here today. We have their president of their parent board, and we have the child care director here as well. You know, as we take in more families, and I know, you know, obviously this is for the addition to the current building, and, you know, while, yes, we were very lucky to get this grant on a couple different fronts, but in reality, it actually helped us to be able to take all of the confirmed enrolled children transition to us. We would not have been able to take the 45 confirmed as of right now that would come over based off of the number of kids in each room for the original building. And so after, you know, much discussion over a lot of things, we decided that, you know, we would need to expand, and lucky enough for us, we were able to purchase the property next door, which was a fluke at the time. Didn't even know it was going on sale, so that worked out in our favor. So, you know, expanding the center, obviously, again, it allows us to better serve the children across all of the age groups, and it still maintains the quality and safety standards that are essential for early childhood care. You know, while we may serve up to 140 children, and I know you asked that question, that is a hard limit for us. I mean, there's really no other way to expand, even though the occupancy of the building is much higher than that. You know, it's important to think about, yes, we may be serving up to 140 children, but for traffic purposes, obviously there will not be 140 vehicles coming through every day. You know, it's per family or whatever mode of transportation that they may have, whether it's by bus, by bike, or other avenues. So I think the majority of that traffic will, you know, only occur twice per day for the majority of it. It's not an all-day thing of increased traffic every hour of the day. The majority will come in at 8 a.m. or just before, between 7 and 8. For pickup, the majority will then be at 5, between 5 or 6. And so, you know, during the daytime, there will not be that increased traffic. There will be, of course, but traffic in general, but it will be at a reduced in terms of amount of vehicles. Just because of, obviously, this also includes our own staff, and we have staff shifts that start at 3 o'clock. So there may be a small uptick, between 2 and 3, but it's not the majority of the currently enrolled kids. And we do have a set policy, which is subject to change, but for right now, for the foreseeable future, the policy will be 50-50 at this point, where it's 50% our staff children and 50% external children, from the community, including Loving Arms. So, our goal is to create just a stable, accessible, and affordable childcare option for any of the families in need, of course, from Loving Arms, but also our staff. This has been a huge, project that all of our staff are greatly appreciative that we've started. It saves them from missing shifts at work, no matter, what the times may be during the day. And so we're able to do that. We appreciate the city's support. Obviously, we did get that approval from the last meeting. And it, obviously, the city was gracious enough to approve and recommend that we do get this special exception. But we welcome any questions just as we continue to strengthen the childcare availability in the community.
Questions for Stacy?
What are your hours of operation?
So it did change slightly from previously. We originally had about at close to 8 a.m. It was actually going to be 7:30, so people could drop off kids before 8. It was 8 to 8. Now, based off of the families that we've spoken to and talked to Loving Arms as well, we will open at 6:30 a.m. because of the university families that have jobs, obviously, and start their work at 7 a.m. There's not a lot at that time. There's just a few, but in terms of kids, but we feel that we were able to accommodate those few kids that'll come in that early. And we will close at 8:30. That is the 8:30 p.m. That will close, obviously, daycare at that time, and that is that time frame will cover 2 of our shifts for our staff as well.
Any other questions for Stacy?
Yeah, I need to think. Okay, so you're changing the opening to accommodate. When you were before us before, this was just for your employees.
It was for both external and internal.
Okay, I guess I didn't understand that. So the opening at 6:30 is not for your employees, but it's for external people who are going to take advantage or use this facility.
I can't say that it wouldn't be used by our staff because, they may have other jobs. They may, something may have happened, so they can certainly utilize it that early. But from the families that we have heard from, they will be using those. We know that they will be using that early time frame to drop off their kids before they go to work at 7.
So when do you think the vast majority of traffic will take place then? From 7 until 8 and from 5 until 6?
Yes.
Is it your responsibility to improve the alleyway, and how are you to improve that?
Yes, so I believe at the last special exception that was approved, it was required that we do improve the alleyway by paving it. And that started on the west side of our property, and then it went all the way out to, down in this picture, but all the way to Fifth Avenue. So we do plan, obviously, still to do that, since that's the flow of traffic that we're going to need. probably will be one of the last things that we do, just so that we don't have any issues with it with construction.
Okay, at the last meeting, it was stated that the city might pay for this paving. Are you paying for this paving this time, or is the city still paying for it?
As far as we are aware, the city is still paying for half. We did get that, I believe, from, I'm trying to remember, somebody from Public Works. They agreed to that, and that was agreed upon previously. And to my knowledge, that has not changed.
Okay, you and the other residents are responsible for maintaining the alleyway in the wintertime, snow. How do you plan upon going about this duty?
Yes, so we actually have a snow removal company, and we also have a mower. They do both of them, and the landscaping as well. If the residents, the neighbors are not able to clear their areas, we were planning to go ahead and just have our snow removal company go ahead and just pave the whole thing out to Fifth Avenue, just for our own safe, so that our parents and families and staff feel comfortable, obviously, using that.
Will the dimensions of the alley change, the width?
I don't think so. We haven't received any other feedback that it would need to change in terms of, I don't think it was technically specified in the last one, but just to city standards, I think was kind of the wording that it had.
So are most of there was one section in here where if there were adults included, that you would need more space. Is this going to be only for children?
Correct. It would be only for children. We already have an adult daycare. It's actually at our main office, so we will not be moving that.
What other kinds of traffic might you anticipate? Will you have like food service deliveries during the day for meals, or is that?
We don't have any intention to use a food delivery service. Most likely, we will be shopping ourselves and purchasing things. I can't say we would never do that.
Sure.
But for our intention for the foreseeable future is we would be doing that purchasing. Of course, there's always packages and things, just like any other property.
Okay, so between 8 and 5 should be pretty quiet.
Hold on. No? That's anything else? Stacy, I just have a couple of quick questions. The Good Neighbor meeting, how many people were there?
4.
4. Okay. And of those 4, everybody was positive?
Yes.
Okay. Seems low. Second question, the question of maintenance of the alley. The staff report talks about the adjacent owners being responsible for maintaining it, but you just said that if they could not do, you would go ahead and do the whole alley. I take that as an implicit guarantee that you're going to maintain the alley, period.
For the most part, yes.
Excuse me?
For the most part, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, can I make one comment?
Yeah.
The city will maintain the alley if it's improved to city standards, which is the condition.
Yeah.
They're responsible for snow removal.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm sorry.
Yes, yes, good, yeah.
So you would, you're accepting responsibility for full snow removal for the length of the alley?
We will accept full responsibility for the snow removal for daycare uses, so that it's not a safety hazard for our staff, families, staff obviously working.
So the neighbors don't have to worry about that?
No,
Okay. All right, thank you. Is that right?
the paved portion,
I'm sorry?
the paved portion.
Okay, that's right. Any other questions for applicant?
Just to clarify, the paved portion is from your property to Fifth,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else want to speak for the applicant?
Hello, my name is Ashley Cooney. I am the Parent Board President for Loving Arms Early Learning Center. We're currently located inside of St. Mark's Church on the east side of Iowa City. However, the church has decided to end our tenancy this fall. Fortunately, Reach for Your Potential has graciously agreed to acquire our program. We contacted them after the state grant was awarded, so the original plan did not include Loving Arms. Without this new partnership, 75 children and nearly 50 staff members, a total of 250 people, including families, will effectively be without childcare and employment. As we've learned through our own scrambling process, the east side of Iowa City is a childcare desert, and running a childcare facility poses numerous challenges. Our program is thriving and simply in need of a new home. Additionally, another child care center is closed recently, and we are seeing an influx in families desperately searching for high-quality child care. With this expansion, Reach for Your Potential will be able to launch a child care center with the necessary support to provide high-quality child care and save numerous jobs by transitioning our staff to a new center. Without this expansion, we will be greatly limited in the number of community members we can serve. Parents will have to make tough decisions about having to quit their job and stay home if we cannot be able to take all of our families with us due to lack of childcare availability in the area. In addition to the expansion of the physical building, the extended outdoor space will provide more play area for the children. This facility is fulfilling a much-needed gap in the community by offering additional childcare spaces, extended hours, and this is a service that's rarely provided in the child care space. Together, we have found a unique opportunity to join forces between two organizations with track records to successfully build a strong community organization. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just want to confirm, you said 75 children?
We currently have 75 children. We have 45 who have confirmed that they are moving over. The other families are waiting for more information before they confirm, but they are in need of childcare.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak in favor of the applicant?
I'm Tom Yates. I live at 1901 B Street. That is the property to the east of the now purchased property. 1849, the most recently purchased one, so it'll be my property on the west side that'll get the large fence. Frankly, in terms of all this, I'm fine with all of this. I really am. I'm glad to see a good social use for this building, which has been sitting empty or of little use for the past several years. I wanted to buy 1849 B Street at one point. I put a bid in on it when it was open for auction and did not get it. I would have torn that house down. The only concerns that I might have, and I don't know what the relationship of this board is to Public Works and Safety, and maybe I don't know. And, you don't have to explain that now, but somebody will need to take a look at how B Street and Fifth Avenue from the City High Court Street parking lot operate. The stop sign, it's a south-facing stop sign at the corner of Fifth Avenue and B Street, is a suggestion to those people who come down, mostly kids. I can tell you, having lived there for a long time, and I taught at City High for a very long time, I walked to work because that was the safest thing to do. The morning is not a bad time, especially now that the high schools have changed to a 9 o'clock start or approximately 9 o'clock start. There's not that much traffic going to City High from that way. I don't know how much the Court Street renovation will impact traffic, and that is something else that will need to be taken into consideration at some point, what traffic gets rerouted to this neighborhood. The real issue is after school when the children are in a hurry to leave. B Street is at an angle. Fifth Avenue is a straight shot north-south, so the sight lines are difficult. Fifth Avenue runs slightly downhill, so the kids think it's a good idea to go speeding down to the suggested stop sign. And the access from Court Street up to the area, in fact, up to my house and all the way to the corner where Fifth Avenue makes a jog, is slightly humped, and the sight lines are not great. So what city public works traffic needs to do to take a look at this, I don't know. I'm not sure that that's your purview, but if you have a conversation with them, that would be one of the important things to take a look at. And the other thing that one of our neighbors pointed out last week at the meeting was that the water and sewer infrastructure needs to be examined. And again, if that's the sort of thing you could suggest to Public Works, we've had water main breaks, especially in the winter. The pipes are old in that neighborhood, and I'm assuming that the daycare is going to want to have need of good facilities coming into the building. If you have any questions for me as a neighbor, we're not all going to agree, I can tell you, the neighbors who are here, but
Questions?
no,
No, thank you very much.
thank you.
So, I assume the staff is going to get with Public Works about these issues that were raised?
Staff or Public Works will see this site plan when it officially goes into an application. After the Good Neighbor meeting, I did reach out to the transportation staff about the concerns along B Street and speed bumps and the stop sign. And it's my understanding at this time, there's no immediate availability to make any improvements along these streets.
But they have at least looked at these particular issues.
Yes,
I just don't
they
see any
are
changes in-
aware of the issues. I asked about if they still do surveying for the neighborhoods. That's no longer a service that they have, but they're aware of these concerns. They've been raised, and it'd be up to them if they can look into it at a later date.
Utilities underneath the alley?
What was that?
Are there any utilities underneath the alley?
I have not been able to see the utilities yet. At this time, we don't have that information, but Public Works will have that.
Sewer or water? No, probably not, right?
Oh, under the alley, probably not. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Ross Nusser with Urban Acres Real Estate. And I just wanted to give support for the application, for the applicant, and to cite a few sources that our community has put forward to kind of guide how we address childcare. So in Better Together 2030, which was a shared vision for Johnson County, Iowa, and it was collaborated on by City of Iowa City, the mayor, the city manager, as well as the other governing bodies around here. It states in here that one of the priorities is to ensure that all neighborhoods have affordable child care. And one of the things that it states in here is that the child care shortage in Iowa touches everyone, not just parents. Providers spend a great deal of time nurturing and caring for our children, but are often met with low wages and lack of benefits in return, leading to fewer providers. For every available slot in Iowa, there are 3 children needing care. This substantial deficit in care forces many parents to leave the workforce and stay home with their children. When the workforce suffers, our economy suffers. Child care is a community issue. Therefore, we must come together to address it. And that was by Don Oliver, who's the president and CEO of the Iowa Women's Foundation. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, Russ.
Good evening. My name is Tim Ruth. I own quite a bit of property over on the south side off of Sycamore, where I partner with Reach for Your Potential. We also have homes, we own several homes that reach staffs. So from the standpoint of working with the group and the company, they're a stellar group to work with. What they say they're going to do, they do. Stacy's an amazing director, and we're currently building a new home for challenged individuals at 2821 Farragut, and it'll be a zero entry slot. But anyway, I'm also involved with this project, as my past history is I've been a general contractor all my life. To address the utilities, we will be excavating the water line in the area. We have to put in a 6-inch water main to the building because of requirements for sprinklers. We'll be putting in a new domestic water service as well. These come at a large cost to the individual. People don't realize that. The sprinkler pipes, we can spend probably $35,000 to get this done. And so, but we'll be improving the sewers. We're looking at those. We've had cameras down them. So to worry about infrastructure, it's not an issue because it'll have to be corrected to be utilized. The electrical services overhead, it will have to be updated simply because it's not large enough for what the elevators, what's going to require a majority of the additional electricity. For the alley, the width of the alley could be dictated not by anyone, but by the trees. There's existing trees along the alley, and the city will have to deal with making sure that the alley, as it is put in, allows for those trees. Because I'm sure the neighbors might not be happy if they lost trees, but Stacy and the group at Reach will be very good about working with that. And as for snow removal, their snow removal contractor will be there early in the morning for safety of the individuals coming. And for daycare, we see it from the standpoint of having a special needs child and having the ability to know that their providers have daycare to take care of their children so they can come to work and not have to maybe have a student or one of our children home alone because there is no daycare provider. So I don't think the community can find a better partner to have. Reach has houses all over Iowa City, especially they're mostly on the east side, and they're a great partner for the community. So, think about it. Daycare is huge, and it's just we must do things. So, thank you. Do you have any questions, I guess?
Well, I have one comment, and that's about the trees in the alleyway. If the trees are in the alley, then the city would have some freedom in deciding
That's going to be an issue for the city.
Yes, exactly. Trees on private property, different matter. But I could see where there might be some surprises on the part of the people that abut the alley and thought that a tree was on their property, and it wasn't. But that's going to have to be
a city issue.
Addressed.
And as for
Yes.
speed bumps, I was told today by the lady in charge of that program that they're not doing any speed bumps this year at all. So, and they're going to rewrite their entire program because every community doesn't really need them. They want them, but they don't necessarily need them. So that's what I was told when we requested them on a street. So thank you.
Anybody else want to speak for the applicant? If not, anybody would like to speak against the applicant? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, could I ask a couple more questions of Stacy before we finish this?
Well, sure. Stacy.
Okay, so the outside people who are coming in, are they primarily from the neighborhood, or are you going to try to focus just on people who are living in that area?
We will certainly accept any children from the area. We will also accept outside of the, maybe 10-block radius, because I don't know if we'll have that many children in that 10-block radius that need childcare. But I can't say for a fact that, like, Loving Arms children that we would be taking that are the external ones, external kids, I can't say where they live. However, where Loving Arms is right now, it's about maybe 5 blocks away, technically. And so where those parents are already used to coming to, if they don't live there, used to coming to this side, the east side of Iowa City, or if, of course, they're there, it's not too far away from where they are now. So that's about all unfortunately, I can't say because I don't have that information.
And your employees may be coming from anywhere in Iowa City?
Possibly, yes.
Because what I'm looking at is we're concerned about the traffic in the alleyway, but if a lot of people are coming from other places, this is going to impact the amount of traffic on the streets also. So that is something I just happen to think about now.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that, we've been trying to figure out, what our plans would be to mitigate that. And so, like I said before, we have one shift that starts at 3 o'clock. We also have one shift that starts at 9. And so, whereas maybe more community children would be 7 to 8, there may be just a few of our staff that will come in just after 8. So that's something to consider at least. I can't, guarantee that, but because not everybody would work a 9 to 3 shift, but that's something that could help mitigate that traffic congestion.
So the community children will only have access or availability of this from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon or during the day?
No, they'll have, if they need to, they will have full access between 6:30 and 8:30.
In the morning to in the evening?
Yes.
They will not have any access after that, after 5:30 or 5, whatever it is, 6?
If they need it, they would. Yeah, we're not limiting that to just our own staff's kids.
Okay.
We don't feel like that's necessary at this point. And we are, obviously the Loving Arms closes at, around 5, and they have to be out by 6 every day, so 6 p.m. So most of those parents and families have already been, used to coming in between 5 and 6. But I can't guarantee that they wouldn't extend past 6 o'clock.
Okay, so your capacity right now is for 140 children.
Mm-hmm.
Is that 140 children for a 24-hour period, or if you have a certain number of children during the day and some of them leave and some of them come in, is there a flexible amount to that?
So no, it's 140 children at any one time that we're providing daycare services to. So it doesn't reset or change or anything. It's 140 and then that's it, because we cannot expand beyond that. The parking just doesn't allow it, and we're happy with that number as it is.
Any questions for Stacy? Thank you. Now, anybody wants to speak for the applicant? If not, anybody would like to speak against the application, feel free to come forward, sign in, and talk to us, please. And keep in mind that any objections raised to the application, the applicant is always allowed to respond afterwards. So anybody opposing the applicant?
Hello, my name is Jim Niebuhr. I reside at 415 Fifth Avenue. Been a resident in this neighborhood since December of 1982. So I've got a history there, seen it change, flux, so forth. I'm going to be a little unorganized since I just learned of this. We out of state when the mailings came out, so I've had 3 days, I guess. And then more things developed at that. That's not salient, so I do have a few concerns, however. Number one, let me state the child care issue. There's probably not a person in this room that doesn't grasp that situation. This is not about the need for child care. I guess my alarm is one that more of a, does the shoe fit in this neighborhood? Zoning is for a reason. There's residential, commercial, light commercial, industrial. My concern is that where's the threshold for this neighborhood? What's the capacity? I know there's been a lot of discussion about the traffic in the alley. Maybe. It's not a good situation, and I could give you history of where are the no parking signs going to be, this side or that. I won't get into that, but that was raised because of the issue of garbage collection and blocking the streets. I don't know if we're all aware that there's another situation just 3, 4 properties to the west. I believe it's a low-income special needs facility, and they have a transport van that when it stops has the ramp that comes out and sits down, and if you forget and turn to the right at the aforementioned stop sign, you're going to be sitting there for a good long while. And it came up with the parking on the side of the streets. What about a fire? What about an ambulance? This and that. So traffic is probably the major concern I have, and the flow of it. Tom, my neighbor, already alluded to the Lamaze course that takes place frequently as school closes. I've seen them go from the parking lot to that stop sign and reach approximately 50, 55 and take a little wiggle S-turn corner, you would think, almost on 2 wheels. So what are the solutions? Some of the obstacles I see to the proposal are just, the major one is the capacity and the size of it. I could poll you folks here. Does your neighborhood include this capacity, this size of operation? It almost feels to me a little bit, because let me back up. I did attend the previous meetings and was in attendance for those. And I walked away saying, I can live with 40 kids, which is what I heard as well. But up to 160 or thereabouts seems like a big bite for that neighborhood and the traffic patterns. Do we solve the East Side problem in one neighborhood alone? Is there a balance in that? I don't know. I mean, I see these recommendations, and they're mostly opinions. Nobody's lived there like the neighbors have. And the burden of proof, I understand, in these situations is not on the neighbors. Well, in your judgment, I'm sure that I'm stumbling. Like I said, this wasn't thought through for days and days. Let me just mention that, get to my note, just scratched. I guess I mentioned balance. Maybe I'm a little sore for losing an elementary school to the county and having a similar capacity shoved into the corner of the street. I sound negative. I'm not, as far as the operation of Reach for Potential. I applaud that. This just feels like a lot of congestion, or at least activity. And in the health, safety, comfort, and welfare, how much of that has been affected, and what's the metric for proving that? Again, I thought about this for about 12 hours now. I'm not negative. I just wonder about the scale. And one particular, and this is one particular thing I would notice and hope to get out of this is just if this is approved, I'm wondering as a builder myself, what happened to the building code about not enlarging the footprint of a non-conforming structure? And this was approximately a 62% increase of that footprint. I'm just wondering. It seems to me that it's going to affect the neighborhood, and how much is too much? We could have used a child care center ourselves nearby. So that's not the issue with me, it's just the appropriateness and the scale. I don't know if anyone has a question of me, but more or less concluded here.
Any question? Just a second. Jim, just a second, please. Questions?
Jim, the vehicle that you mentioned, that when you turn the street, it blocks the street, is that because the loading van is actually in the street?
It's in B Street, yes.
Okay.
It's got, just like a school bus, one of those small school buses.
Yeah.
And it takes time. You never know.
Sure.
I mean, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not.
Okay.
Again, my points are traffic and how much of an impact are we talking about? Thanks.
Jim, just a second. Just want to make sure everybody had a chance to ask you any questions. I just have one quick question. First of all, I want the staff to respond to the question about expansion of a non-conforming use. That was part of the consideration in this application, I assume.
This is not a non-conforming use. It was approved to be a daycare in November, and it's allowed to continue as a daycare if this is approved or denied. As has mentioned to the building code and the non-conforming structure, I don't believe there is any non-conformities to the structure, the existing structure. The non-conformities are related to the existing parking. It's not building related.
Jim, I have one question also. I just want to make sure I understand your concern is about not the daycare per se being in that location, it's the capacity, proposed capacity of this particular project?
That's, yes, correct.
Okay.
And the size of the structure. I mean, I don't know. I could be totally wrong. I could be living there, whatever the schedule is, with Court Street torn up, it's going to be, who knows, 2-3 years of special conditions. But it's going to cause a different traffic flow in that area, without a doubt. I don't know. As I started my comment, I could wake up and go, nothing to it. I'd already lived with the 40-50. I was surprised to hear that was really 100, but now we're talking about an increase in scale. That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
I also want to speak against the applicant. You have to come to the microphone.
Okay, my name's Diane Niebuhr, and I'm married to the guy that was just up here talking, but I guess my concerns are, I just want somebody to explain to me how you're going to have enough parking. Are there codes for how much parking you need to have for, so if you have 140 kids in this place, and most of them are going to be dropped off probably about 8 o'clock, right? And picked up about 5 o'clock. That, if you got 2 kids in each family, that's a lot of cars trying to park and pick up a kid or drop a kid off. There's not really enough parking, is there?
There is adequate parking on site. Every 20 children requires 1 stacking space. At 140 children, they have the 7 stacking spaces shown.
What's a stacking space?
It's these spaces, if you look on the visual up here along the west property line, it's for individuals to pull up, park for a quick moment, and drop their children off, and then pull away down the alley. There's also the requirement that 1 parking space is required per staff. At 20 staff, they have the 20 required parking spaces, and 1 additional parking space for every 10 children. At 140 children, that's 14 spaces, with a total of 34 parking spaces and 7 stacking spaces, and all is provided on site.
Okay. Wow. That's pretty amazing. The daycare my kids went to was a lot smaller than this, and they had a lot more parking places than this place does. So I'm just wondering how that's going to work out. And you're going to come out. They're going to walk from the stacking spot all the way around to some door, and then they're going to get their kid, and or kids, and then they have to walk back out, to these stacking spaces to get their kids in their car seats and everything. Is there really going to? I don't know. Okay, so there is someone has done some kind of a study to know how many parking places you need to have if you have that many kids, right? Okay, all right. The other thing is, I have a question for Stacy. So if things go sideways for people in the neighborhood, who do we call? You?
Ma'am,
I'm sorry.
would like for you to really address your questions to the board.
Okay, I'm sorry.
If you
I
can
was
raise a
just
question,
curious
we can
about
have
that.
Stacy come up and respond to you, but trying to avoid conversations back and forth.
Okay, all right. I will go sit down then.
Well, no, to raise the issue, and you can have Stacy.
Yeah, I would like to know who to call and I also, because I also heard that the daycare is going to be open not only for the extended hours, but on holidays and it just seems to be really extended. And what will that do to parking if people in the neighborhood want to have friends over? Are there going to be people parking on the street where our friends can't park then on holidays or whatever? I don't know. Just curious about the overall, I guess, as my husband said, the magnitude of it. It seems like a really big thing for a kind of a small neighborhood. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stacy, you want to come up?
So, yes, we will be open on holidays. And the sole reason for that is that we have staff working shifts on holidays. Of course, we have our homes, and quite a few of our members or clients, they don't have families, so they do stay home at our homes. And, we provide celebrations and things. So we will be open on those holidays, except for when it's a weekend. We just can't be open on weekends, unfortunately. But if it is during the week, we will be to accommodate our own staff. The most likely scenario is that community children or external children will likely not attend those days. Of course, I can't guarantee that, but if they're not, right now, Loving Arms is not open on holidays. So, they're used to that part. Of course, other external kids, it kind of depends on the family. So for the most part, the children who attend on holidays would be our own staff, and it may not even be all of those children because not everybody works on a holiday, of course.
And you're available, I assume, all the time. In case the neighborhood has a concern, they can contact you directly.
So they would actually be contacting our new child care director over here. She's currently with Loving Arms for any concerns. If for some reason she's not available, they could contact me either at the office. I prefer not to give out my cell phone number, but we do have an on-call number just for our own homes. So if there's an emergency and Kayla's not able to address the issue, they can certainly get a hold of me and I can talk to people about it, whatever it may be. But yes, I'm essentially on call all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Can I address some of the other things? Is that okay? Or
I would
do we want to see if there's anybody else?
Unless, Ross, you look like you want to say something. I'm not sure if you need to, but
I'm just waiting for the right time.
I talk a lot, so.
Well, I'll ask a question, following up with Jim's concern about the vans taking up street space. Do you have vans currently servicing or bringing children to your daycare? Do you have children with disabilities that come in a specially equipped van, and if so, where would they be dropped off?
Yeah, so I don't know yet. We don't have any confirmed children with special needs that would come in on, that would be a Seats bus. Johnson County Seats bus would be our guess. We use that for our own members, our clients, and they do park on the street at houses because that's their rules. But if somebody were to be dropped off on a Seats bus, I'm on the Paratransit Advisory Committee, so, obviously I speak to them when that happens. And I think we could work out a fairly easy situation where the buses would come in and actually, instead of stopping on the street and blocking, possibly come in either to the parking lot or stop the alley for that time. Everywhere in the city does go through that. Obviously, we have it at our own office because our adult daycare is there. So, it's depending on the number of people getting off the bus, it can take a little while. If it's just one, it's a little bit, shorter time, but it's something that, we have to work around, obviously. But we don't currently have anybody confirmed with a special need, although we will take them.
Okay, so are all children going to be let off on your property? What if people decide to let children off in the street?
We will not allow that. If that happens, they'll get a warning. And then if it happens again, we'll have to discuss operationally what we will do. We don't have a policy set at this moment, but we're working on the policy, so. Because that's not safe for anybody, of course.
Any other questions?
And I just wanted to briefly give some light on the search for the property, that having locations for the daycare, new construction was explored previously. The amount that it would cost to build new construction was totally prohibitive. And the previous application was for 100 children. There was some the reason why 40 is a number that's being kind of thrown around tonight is that there was some confusion as to what the opening number of enrollment was. And keep in mind that application came before this board prior to any notification of closures of daycare. So this is in large part a response to the closure of daycares. And so just wanted to throw those 2 cents in for them.
Thank you.
I will point out also, obviously, we had the Good Neighbor meeting, and there were only 4 that attended at that point, which I'm sorry that he wasn't able to. We have spoken directly to the neighbor obviously the east approves of the project. To the west, we have spoken with her, and she is also in approval for the project. And the property to the south, so to south behind the parking lot. It's being transferred ownership now. It was just purchased, or they're closing very soon, I should say. And they also approve of the project. So.
Thank you. Now, back to anybody who has concerns or objections to the application. Any final questions from the board to staff or speakers? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I need a motion to move this forward somehow for board discussion.
Move to close the public hearing.
No, you need to move the special exception to put it on the floor.
I move to approve EXC 25-0002, an application submitted by Stacy Humiston of Reach for Your Potential requesting a special exception to allow the expansion of a daycare use in a low-density, single-family residential RS5 zone for the property located at 1839 and 1849 B Street.
I second it. We need to have the staff recommendations included in the motion, don't we?
Subject to the conditions.
Okay. Thanks. Subject to,
Here.
subject to the staff recommendations with an expiration timeline of 12 months, as listed in the staff report dated 3/12/2025. I have to read all of them?
You got to do the whole Monty
Trying to
thing.
get out of that. Okay. Prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, A, improvement of the alley to city standards from the western property line east to Fifth Avenue. B, development of a pedestrian path with a demarcated crossing over the alley from the building and play area to the parking area, subject to review and approval by the city engineer. Number 2, the outdoor play area must be enclosed by a 4-foot-tall opaque fence to provide extra screening from the nearby residential uses. Any new pedestrian routes through the site that directly abut parking areas shall be separated by a raised curb or barrier that is a minimum of 5 inches in height. 4, provide screening to the S2 standard between the existing parking areas and the outdoor play area from adjacent properties along the east and west property lines as shown in the site plan dated 3/6/2025. Provide screening of the new parking area with a 6 to 8 foot fence that meets the S5 standard and includes additional S2 screening around the east, west, and south fence perimeter. Provide do not enter signage and one-way pavement markings to direct traffic through the site. Number 7, outdoor lighting, new and existing, being compliant with Section 14-5G-3 standards for single-family and two-family uses. And number 8, outdoor lighting must be turned off by 1 hour after the business closes.
Have a second?
I second.
Been moved and seconded. Board discussion.
Well, I'll just mention that I'm very happy to see the outdoor lighting addressed in the staff recommendations. which had not been addressed previously, but we had placed a condition on it by the board, and including the fact that they need to be turned off 1 hour after the business closes.
Discussion or questions? I would just like to say, I understand the concern of the neighbors here, that it is a dramatic change in the use of a property that's basically been underused for a while. I don't share the pessimism of the neighbors. I think this will work out fine, but the owners and operators are going to be very aware of concerns, and we'll have to respond to them if something comes up. I also have a minor concern with the response from the staff regarding Public Works looking at this area and saying there's nothing to do right now. And the little that I've been around that area, especially the issue of the stop sign, there just seems to be something that Public Works is missing. And I don't know, but I've seen areas where stop signs are illuminated or crosswalk signs are illuminated. Anyway, attention is drawn to the sign. It makes it much more difficult to ignore, hopefully, even in a teenager's mind. So I hope that the Public Works will take another look at that area again. Just a comment.
I'm just really concerned about the fact that the occupancy went up almost 50%. What is an appropriate size of a daycare for a residential area such as this? And it's not that I don't want a daycare, but wishing doesn't make it so. And right now, we're looking at this pie in the sky thing, but when it's built and we deal with it no matter what, and the neighbors deal with it. And I think we need to take into consideration that the neighbors have investments in their properties. Some of them have lived there a long time, and their needs and wants need to be respected. There are so many great things about this, but I'm also nervous. I think this group would be much better at attempting to deal with these problems than other groups. I'm just not sure about what might happen.
Are you concerned enough to find some of the findings of the staff not agreeable? Because that's the next step in the process.
Yeah, no, I know. And I would have to look at this and tell you which one it is.
Should we go ahead and have a motion to accept the findings of fact and then discuss it, or do we have to discuss it before we accept them?
I don't think it really matters.
Okay.
Whatever you find easier.
I have a comment as well. I live 2 doors up from Longfellow School. And, it's an established neighborhood. Been there, the houses have been there since the 20s and 30s, et cetera. And a lot of the population is aging. And I can tell you, I've lived there, I moved down here in 2002. And the traffic to me is thrilling, to be honest. The traffic, it's a pain in the neck for 20 minutes in the morning and maybe 30 minutes in the afternoon. And so you guide yourself around, you maneuver your schedule around that traffic. If that traffic weren't there, and if that school weren't there, I don't know that I'd want to live in that neighborhood. And what I'm saying is that I think this is going to breathe an incredible breath of fresh air into your neighborhood, into your property values, into, having kids around is a pretty spectacular thing. And I don't know, maybe there are a lot of kids in your neighborhood, I don't know, but I'm just saying that I think that from what I've seen here, this group demonstrates an amazing commitment to the community. It's forward-looking. It's going to consider all of your issues, and I'm sure they will address them. I see it as a win-win for everybody in the neighborhood. That's my comment.
I just want to get something clear from Nancy. You said something about the dramatic increase in the capacity of would you say 50%?
Not quite 50%.
That wasn't my impression. I'm a little confused about the
I thought
numbers
it was
now.
100 last time,
It was.
and I could be wrong.
So the building capacity last time was 158. The applicant intended to have up to 100 children on site. Now the capacity is 196, and they intend to have up to 140.
But in both those instances, they are restricted by other standards that they need to meet.
That's correct, and that's mainly the parking is what's going to set a hard limit of 140 with those stacking space requirements.
So the capacity increased because the actual building space increased, not just arbitrarily increasing the capacity.
Just keep in mind that the public hearing is closed, so I think it's one thing for staff to confirm what's already been presented, but not new information because the public hearing is closed.
Okay. Anyway, we need to establish findings of fact. Someone like to make that motion? I told you, I don't do those things.
Okay, regarding item EXC 25-0002, I concur with the findings set forth in the staff report of 3/12/2025 and conclude that the general and specific standards are satisfied. Unless amended or opposed by another board member, I recommend the board adopt the findings in the staff report for the approval of this application.
Everyone concur? No amendments offered, no changes. Findings of fact are accepted. Time for a roll call.
Baker,
Yes.
Carlson, Russo,
Yes.
Swigert,
Yes.
Tallman.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody on both sides for coming out tonight. Next up on the agenda is discussion of placement of special exception applications and appeals on the board's agenda.
You should read this statement about appeals first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You're very right.
Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Okay. The motion is approved. Any person desiring to appeal this decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after this decision is filed with the city clerk's office. Okay. Next item agenda. Ann, you want to sort of summarize?
Sorry, are we on item 4 now?
Yes.
Okay. Ann Russett, Neighborhood and Development Services. At the last meeting, the board requested that there be a discussion on how items are placed on the board's agenda, so we will go over that now. There was a memo in your packet. I will also note that we received 2 pieces of correspondence late in the day today regarding this item that were shared with you via email, and our copies are before you as well.
I did want to add that the correspondence, I've been directed to inform the board to please read the email thread from bottom to top, just so you get the thread in order.
Okay, so first we're going to start off with special exceptions and variances, and I kind of see this as a way to explain the job that Parker and I do and our role in making sure that applications are ready and are presented to the board in a timely manner. So first was special exceptions and variances. In the zoning code in 14 AC2, there's a section on special exceptions and variance that details the application filing information, references application schedules. This does not apply to appeals. In your board packet, there was also the application deadline schedule. And the reason that we provide this is to ensure that staff has time to review applications, to prepare a staff report, to publicly notice the applications that they're going to be on your agenda. So that's the reason that we have the application deadlines. Our role is to assist applicants, to notify applicants of those deadlines, but also to be reasonable in the application of the deadline schedule. I just wanted to give you a couple of examples in how we kind of think about this with two specific cases. The first is 21 Sturgis Drive, which was heard by your board at the last meeting. And this is very typical of how these applications come to us. Oftentimes, applicants will just originally reach out to staff with some questions. You know, I'm thinking about doing some type of project. Well, it requires a special exception. What's a special exception? What's the process? What's the application entail? For 21 Sturgis Drive, the applicant first reached out to Parker at the beginning of November 2024. We had several conversations with the applicant in November and December. We reached out to our colleagues in Public Works and Transportation Planning to get questions answered. We coordinated all of that. We explained what application materials were needed. We received the application on January 10th of 2025, and that met the deadline. And your board heard that at the February meeting. The application that you heard tonight was a little bit different. As you know, that was originally heard by the board in November of 2025. As was discussed tonight, their plans changed due to the closure of the other daycare. So we received an application after the deadline for the daycare that you discussed tonight. We decided to move that forward to your agenda for tonight for several reasons. One, we were familiar with the project. We had just reviewed it a few months ago. We were still able to have a good neighbor meeting. We were still able to publicly notice the meeting. And we also felt that due to the critical need of daycare facilities in our community, it was important not to just have them wait into April simply because they were a couple days late. So that's what we're talking about when we're trying to be reasonable and move these forward as quickly as possible. Appeals are different than special exceptions for a couple different reasons. One is that most of the work related to an appeal is done prior to submittal of an appeal. First of all, the appellant is required in the information that they provide staff to identify the grounds for the appeal. Staff has already issued the building permit. We've already approved the site plan. Whatever they're appealing from the staff's decision, we've already done work documenting why we came to the decision that we came to. The second reason is that appeals can be used as a tactic to slow down development. This greatly impacts property owners' ability to move forward with the project, and delays can be costly. So our role in appeals is to work to ensure that they are heard as quickly as possible by your board. And that is part of the reason is what's on this next slide, which is the stay of proceedings. If we receive an appeal, whatever they are appealing, that work has to stop. They are not allowed to move forward with construction. And as I said before, that greatly impacts cost and timeline of these projects. There's also a specific deadline outlined in your procedural rules for when appeals must be submitted. The appellant has to submit the appeal within 30 days of whenever the action took place. So if it's the issuance of a building permit, we can't receive an appeal more than 30 days after that building permit is issued. The other part of this is that we cannot accept an appeal if it was submitted more than 15 calendar days after construction work started. So those are really the hard deadlines for appeals. Lastly, I just wanted to cover what the powers of the board are, and this is what's laid out in our zoning code. The board shall have the following powers: to hear and decide appeals, to hear and decide applications for special exceptions, and to also consider variances. And this is the same as what is laid out in the state code. Hearing and deciding appeals, special exceptions, and variances. So that's what we had to share with you tonight, and we can take any questions that you may have.
Okay. So, special exceptions are usually there is a month between the time that they apply for a special exception and it comes to us on the board.
Usually, we've been in contact with the applicant for months before they even submit an application. Yes.
Okay. And the month is to give you time to go through the findings, to prepare a report for us. So this is to your advantage so that you have time to deal with this along with everything else. When I read it, I thought, okay, and I understand that. You have other things to do, and you want to make sure that you have sufficient time to go over it so that you can present a staff report that explains how it deals with the part of the code it is impacted by.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think the other thing, too, is that it's not only preparing the staff report, but a site plan is required when they submit their application, and we have to review the site plan. Sometimes there's changes, most times there's changes. So we have to provide comments, they have to submit revisions. So there's some back and forth that happens with staff and the applicant during that time frame.
Is there a vetting of the legitimacy of the appeal? In other words, it can't be groundless.
It can be groundless, and then there's a stop work order. That's the thing. It's not groundless until you folks decide that it's groundless.
I see.
You know, they've got to explain it, but even if you looked at it and they said the setback is wrong, and you go, well, the setback, well, I'm just making this up, you know, the setback is 4 feet, and you're going, well, goodness, it easily meets 4 feet, and they're appealing the setback, but it has to come before you folks to deny that appeal. So that's one of the concerns of the stop work order issue, so.
So in this particular issue, I don't want to relitigate this issue, but a stop work order had been issued for that property.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the specifics of a case that we already heard, but yes, a stop work order was issued.
Did they file a bond with the appeal?
No. But that's why you also have, if you want to put back up that 15-day, if you can see construction in 15 days, you have to appeal within 15 days. Again, because you're putting more time and effort and cost into this project. And so then we're not going to let you wait till 29 days to appeal, if you can see it. So.
My question is, what is and I'm not, the case that was before us in February is done and over. I want to look ahead to other cases that may come before us as an appeal. I want to look to see if there are some changes that we need to make sure that our regulations are clear and concise, so that everybody can understand them. So there's no confusion as to what needs to be done and when in order to do it. And one of the things is with this, it says it has to be filed within a reasonable time if such appeal and it's 15 days. So you're going along, you see something, you're not sure if this is correct. You have a feeling this is not correct. So you have 15 days to come to the secretary or whatever, to the city clerk, and say, I would like to file an appeal for this. From this, it seems that you have 15 days to get your case together. Most times, people who appeal have a lawyer. You need to contact a lawyer, have them make time to read this. I understand not wanting to cost the person who's doing the building more money, but we need to weigh so that both parties feel that we are objective to both of their sides. And right now, I'm wondering if we are.
Let me add something here, and I don't want to go back to that particular case, but it's my understanding that in the staff report for that particular case, the applicant had asked for a deferral before the staff report was written, but the staff report did not mention the request for a deferral. That's not the real big question, but that's just one that sets up the next question.
Well, there's not a staff report, there's an appeal. So staff, in an appeal, you are challenging a decision by staff. Right? And so staff doesn't make a report like they did tonight. They defend their decision.
Okay.
But the person appealing goes first because they've got to explain what it is. So there's no staff report.
Okay.
So
the board itself first heard about this request for a deferral at the meeting itself.
I would say they did not request a deferral. We told them when the meeting was to be held, and they wanted it at the next month. I don't know that I'd call that a deferral. They disagreed with when we put this on the agenda.
Objected to the date and
Yes.
requested.
Right. And the board was represented by outside counsel, not our office.
Okay.
For this very reason, we don't want to be conflicted in supporting staff. So you get an outside attorney to represent the board.
I'm just trying to figure out what the board can do in this situation, and it's something we had talked about, which is, okay, it comes to the meeting. The board itself finds out that the appealer wanted a different date. Okay. It's my understanding that the board at that time, even though it wasn't prepared for that at the time, there was some confusion about what the board could do at that time, that the board had a right to agree with the person appealing and say, okay, we're not going to hear this appeal until the next meeting or until a date specific. Is that possible?
Yeah, that's the board's. You just have to realize that there's somebody on the other side.
Oh, I understand, but
right. Just because someone is saying
if the board felt strongly
something
that this
doesn't-
should have been postponed for a month or 2 weeks or whatever, the board had that power.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So in the future, that's one thing to keep in mind. You do have the power.
And the board has the power to move it to the next week. You know, you don't have to move it to the next formal
That's
meeting.
my point, that you could, 2 weeks or a month, the board could make a decision. We're not comfortable knowing now that this applicant, this appealer has concerns and wanted it done at a different time. You could say, tough luck, or that appealer could make a compelling case that there's a reason that this should have been granted this way. In other words, it takes it shifts the responsibility for the timing back to the board. The board heard this person wanting a change. The board did not agree with that person, proceeded to go ahead and hear the hearing and make the decision. Well within their right, but also well within their right to say, you're right, we should postpone this 2 weeks. That's the only point I'm trying to make, is that it's not necessarily a final decision, arbitrary decision by the staff or anybody else. You do have the right to overrule that, accepting the fact that there are consequences to that for the person who's actually building.
But one of the problems with this, when we, as Larry tonight said, when I wasn't sure that I wanted to vote for this exception coming forward, I had to have facts. I had to state why I felt that I did not want to vote for this. In everything that we talk about, we have to support what we're saying by facts. That particular evening, one side said that it was not appropriate for the board to hear this, that it should have been postponed for a month. There were no facts. The attorney said, the attorney for the board said that, no, this was legal, but he didn't state any facts. It's like I go, you know, if you go into court and you go, well, this is legal, if you're a lawyer and you go into court and you say, well, this is legal, and you have nothing to back it up, then, you know, do you have any ground to really stand on? And so I'm concerned about, do we need to put a few things into our procedural rules so that everybody understands that there are certain things that need to happen?
Well, if you want to make it completely set in concrete and clear, you can simply say, if you're 1 day late, you got to go to the next meeting. Or you allow what's a norm, you're 1 day late, you're 2 days late. You know what? The fair thing to do is to go ahead and schedule this at the regular time, which is, I would prefer that be in place than just happily having a rule saying, if X happens, then Y has to happen. There's some discretion involved, reasonable discretion, I thought, on the part of the staff. And the person making the appeal evidently did not make a compelling reason to have the board wait to hear the case. And I think that's perfectly legitimate, as long as the board understands that had that option.
Well, I have so that raises a question for me. Say it's an item on the agenda, and we review the item on the agenda, and we come to our meeting. Isn't it at the meeting where we maybe become aware of, at the meeting where the appeal is scheduled, then at that point, we become aware of the person making the appeal perhaps has a reason, a good reason to request more time. It isn't before the meeting occurs.
And that's right, it's at the meeting.
It's at the meeting. Okay, so staff isn't going to tell us 2 weeks before, by the way, we got this appeal, and when we told them it was going to be held in February, they expressed some concern. We're not going to get that heads up. We come to the meeting, and it's at the meeting.
Well, the board can be represented by someone not in our office, and how that attorney wants to advise the board is up to that attorney, right?
But it happens, I'm
The
just
decision
thinking of
will
dates.
happen at the,
At the meeting.
Yes, of
That
course.
was scheduled, that perhaps the
right.
person making the appeal is not happy about it
Right.
having been scheduled.
Right.
Okay, so that's when we hear about it. And at that time, that's when we could say, we defer this for, how much time do you need? 2 weeks?
Yeah.
You know, not an inordinate, because I'm looking at these dates, and if we held strong and fast to the dates, it's 2 months. It's 2 months somebody is delayed from a project that's been permitted, and yeah, that just seems
But at
unreasonable.
the same time, the board could say, we're not going to give you another month, we're going to give you a week.
Yes.
My whole point is
That's my-
that the staff has reasonable flexibility on scheduling, because these are not rules, these are guidelines. And if the board disagrees with that, the board can change it at that meeting. I don't know if the board understood that they had that power at the meeting, that they
I
could have
think we
postponed it.
did.
What?
I think we did,
Did?
absolutely.
Okay.
I don't recall the applicant specifically requesting either a delay at the meeting?
He did.
He did?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because when he said that, I thought, oh, deja vu. Because they asked for a continuous or a deferral the second time they came before the board, and they said because the audio or the equipment from the city did not function properly, and they did not get the information in a
We were
timely
having
manner.
trouble
It was
downloading.
delayed, and so they asked for a deferral, and we said, okay, we deferred it for a week. But this time, there was, as I said, it was really confusing as to what they were discussing. I felt very uncomfortable.
There was a lot of information I felt that was thrown out about terminology, quoting things from our procedures, a lot of dates that were almost seemed circular as they were being presented to us. And I think if anything we want to look at, because I think staff needs the leeway to make these decisions. I guess one of the questions boils down to language, and in our board procedures, it says that regular hearings will be held as needed at a regular time and place to be set by the members of the board. That doesn't address what's on the agenda for that meeting, and it's been suggested by some that the board should have more control over the actual agenda, because I interpret, and maybe I'm wrong, the regular time and place is the schedule. I don't, is that not right?
I would disagree. The board has decided they want to meet on Wednesdays at 5:15. That's what the regular meeting.
That's what the schedule is.
That's the regular meeting.
Okay.
The schedule is the requirement for special exceptions in the ordinance that says there should be a schedule for special exceptions.
But it doesn't specify or address that the board actually sets the agenda as to what comes before it.
No, but the Board of Adjustment is a little different than many boards because you're not making recommendations to council. You're hearing matters that are asked of you. I mean, this is a very unusual item, right? It's usually if somebody appeals or asks for a special exception, that's what comes before you. Unlike Parks and Rec or the Senior Center, where you usually have the chair involved in the setting the agenda, because what's going next? Do you want to talk about this month? Do you want to talk about it, well, it's summer, why don't we wait until the fall? Those sorts of things, whereas the Board of Adjustment, your agenda is sort of set by what outside folks are submitting.
to us.
Yeah, it's a little different.
But the implication is that we have control over the agenda, is some of what I've heard.
Right. Yes, you've got control, probably not of what you see on this piece of paper, but whether you want to hear it tonight, yes, absolutely, yeah.
And when would that come about on this? I'm looking at the cheat sheet.
Can you speak in the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the cheat sheet. I'm trying to follow this. So at one point during the meeting, would it be the motion?
No, you'd have to do that right away because you don't probably want anything, you don't have the hearing at all. You want to just.
How would the board know?
Usually someone knows, right? Because they've got an attorney or the applicant, the person appealing has talked to staff and so on and so forth, so.
At the worst, if they haven't talked to staff yet, maybe it would be invite applicant to speak.
Right.
At that
Right,
point,
sure.
then the applicant would
Yes.
speak and they'd say, I haven't had enough time to.
Right.
Okay.
And then the board would just continue the the public hearing and defer the matter till the next meeting, whenever that would be.
Sue, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, that in addition to just hearing from the appellant, you should also hear from the property owner before. I mean, there's other people involved in an appeal besides just the appellant, and they may have a different opinion on the request.
An appeal process, that makes perfect sense. I
Right.
mean, but for something like a special exception,
Yeah.
if the neighborhood wanted more time, that doesn't have the same weight as the applicant, does it?
I guess that's for the board to decide, but I
Right.
guess in the case of appeals, I'm saying there's lots of there's more than just
Sure.
the appellant that's involved.
So I don't know if there's any specific recommendation we want to make about changing anything procedurally about what the staff has been doing in the past.
But obviously, we're aware of your concerns, and should somebody in the future wish not to have it heard at the time it's scheduled, to make sure that you're aware of that at the beginning of your meeting, if we're aware of it.
Any other comments on this issue?
So just for clarification on my part, so I'm looking at application, the public hearing, staff report, applicant speaks, invite public comment, so that the public gets a chance to, and I'm thinking of an appeal.
No.
I think the process is different for an appeal, and you probably don't have that process in front of you.
Okay.
But,
It is different.
yeah, I think it's the appellant and then staff,
Yeah, it is.
and then typically the owner.
Yeah, on appeals, Parker, whoever is for staff, will just make a brief introduction of 10 seconds or so. This is an appeal of such and such. Then who's ever challenging it would make their pitch as to why the city erred. And then the city would respond and saying why we didn't err. And then anybody who's in favor of the appeal would go. Anybody who's opposed to the appeal, presumably the property owner, then a rebuttal, and then the board would discuss.
So at that point of discussion, we could say,
Or you could right away, anytime.
depending on when we knew that
Yes.
there was
Right.
this
Yep.
dissatisfaction with
Right.
the timing.
Right.
So if an appellant opposed the date, we wouldn't have to follow this specific order. We could request the opponent, in other words, the property owner, the opponent, to come and speak, to present their reasoning why they didn't want.
Sure.
to-
I think you'd want to hear from both city staff and a property owner as to why there should not be a deferral. And then you just have to make that decision.
Okay, my cheat sheet has an item 5, other business, but the formal agenda doesn't have an other business option. So I just want to throw in an other business here after we do the minutes very quickly. It's a request for something to be on the agenda for the next meeting. So at this time, we. Oh, sure, go ahead.
I would like to thank everybody, the staff, for the time they spent on this and everything, because this is something that I want to feel comfortable with, and I want to make sure that we treat both sides equally and fairly. This is more a court than any other city bodies that they meet with. And I want to make sure that they feel that both sides have been treated fairly. And so I thank you for all the time that you put into this.
Consideration of minutes for February the 20th. Any corrections, amendments? I would just like to thank the minute taker for publicly embarrassing me by putting in the comment that Mr. Baker said he was too old to understand the process of using apps. It's good to know that that'll go down on the record somewhere. But other than that,
Well, we do need a motion and a second on the minutes.
I motion to accept the minutes.
I second.
moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now, very briefly, under a new other business, basically, as you recall, I had asked the staff to respond to this question about pre-assessing improvements to be made on properties, public works properties, making the applicant pay up front. And Ann is going to prepare some information about that. With y'all's permission, I'd like to have that on the agenda as a discussion item for the next meeting.
I move that we have it on the agenda of the next meeting.
Second.
I just felt the swelling of the waves. Thanks, it's been moved and seconded. Any objections to that? If not, we'll have it on the agenda for next month. And that being said, we need to move to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.